Hi folks, welcome to RG Impact. We're catching up today with the SBF and FTX drama. This time we're going to focus on one of the sideshows of the near miss that Taylor Swift had with FTX by pulling out of a sponsorship deal. Or did she? Let's unpack it. So how does Taylor Swift fit into this cryptocurrency world, I can hear you asking? Well, quite easily as it happens. We'll go through that specifically and provide the background and the ins and outs, as there's been one or two, as far as I can see, false reports on the subject. So I'll go through the facts and you can make up your own mind. I'll try to make this a standalone video so you don't have to keep referring to Google or whatever your reference source is to get the picture. And to do so, let's give a quick introduction to our two protagonists. Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried, aka SBF. He's 31 years old and gifted academically and worked for a couple of years at Jane Street, learning the ins and outs of how to trade derivatives. He left Jane Street and set up a cryptocurrency trading company, Alameda Research. I've read somewhere recently that at one point he was making up to $1 million a day doing that, but I haven't been able to independently verify it. But by all accounts, it was very lucrative. He then set up a cryptocurrency exchange to buy and sell cryptos, and this was called FTX, and this is where his wealth really exploded. When he issued his own crypto token FTT, or FTX's crypto token I should say, the wealth of the company, or the valuation of the company, was over $30 billion at one point. All of this grew very rapidly, but through a combination of reasons, there was a run on the FTX exchange, i.e. people started to take their cryptocurrencies out of it. That caused a rapid decrease in FTX's assets, which really should have been the customer's assets. But anyway, the company couldn't keep up with the withdrawals. The inevitable happened, and the liquidators/administrators were called in. Reports of an $8 billion black hole in FTX came quickly thereafter, and FTX was reportedly lending or giving its money to Alameda to trade with. Essentially, Alameda and FTX were being operated as a single entity or unit, so it is alleged. Stories of a very opulent and some would say a luxurious and debauched lifestyle in the Bahamas started to circulate. Apparently FTX was being run from a penthouse mansion by what some have called a polycule. And Sam Bankman-Fried was extradited from the Bahamas to the US. He gave several fairly rambling interviews with different reporters in which he maintained his innocence, and he has been charged since with huge frauds, conspiracies and bribery. His previous retinue were quick to offer up assistance to the feds in an appeal to achieve a lesser sentence themselves, as a number of his staff and colleagues were also charged. Notably amongst them was one Caroline Ellison, who was the CEO at 28 of Alameda Research. She's been given a letter which will save her prison time, which could have been up to a maximum of 110 years had she been found guilty of all the charges. She, however, still faces financial restoration and penalties, as well as potential for tax charges, which could also include prison time. This is not trivial. There is still billions of customer funds apparently missing, and up to 1 million people have lost money one way or another, and a lot sadly may never see a chunk of their life savings ever again. On the other hand, we have Taylor Swift, a musician through and through. She started writing songs professionally as early as aged 14. Originally from the country music genre under the big label Machine, she released 5 studio albums and 2 singles. Love Story and You Belong to Me got her huge recognition, and through these and other singles and albums she entered the mainstream. She widened somewhat her musical style and appeals to a wider audience than just the country fans. We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together became her first #1, and I could go on and on about the plaudits bestowed upon her. But if I mention things like Grammys, Emmys, Artist of the Decades, and in respect of the former, she had those in abundance, as well as many other awards. You get the idea. A side factoid for you, she is a cat lover, and her cats have appeared in 1 or 2 of her videos apparently, and one of her cats is reportedly the 3rd richest pet in the world. apparently worth nearly $100 million. And don't ask me how I know that, and I won't tell. So that's the introduction, and without further ado, let's get to the matter in hand. How did Taylor Swift collide with Sam Bankman-Fried and the cryptocurrency world, and what's the big deal? Well, if you've been following any of the FTX saga, you might know that there have been several celebrities, you can see here, who have been or are being sued by investors who lost money. And the investors are claiming essentially that the celebrities who endorsed FTX were part of the reason, or at least part of the reason, that they invested. And as such, the celebrities should be accountable for promoting essentially a white elephant. The celebrity endorsement side of the whole FTX debacle has become something of a hot potato, with celebrities trying to distance themselves from any blame. I was as fooled as the rest of you is a common line they are giving. Now, Taylor Swift apparently was going to enter into a $100 million endorsement deal to promote FTX, and this was fairly well along the process to being completed. The deal to endorse FTX didn't actually go ahead, and the big dichotomy at the heart of the matter essentially boils down to who pulled out or who stopped the deal. Now, in painting a narrative on this, you can understand what the benefit in terms of either perception or potentially even a court disclosure or deposition might be for either side. On the Taylor Swift side, you have the I will not be involved in a company that has credibility issues or appears corrupt or has unusual practices, etc., however you might put it. So Taylor Swift took the moral approach after doing the appropriate due diligence and didn't do business. Now, of course, all of these points are being argued in hindsight, which is obviously very easy to do. There has also, let's be fair, a bit of an element of knocking celebrities when they're down, as the press are often apt to do. So one pundit made the point that all of these celebrities were just in it for the money and hanged the investors, so to speak. Then they cite Taylor Swift as being evidence that if these other investors had thought about it or looked into what they were promoting, they would have seen the dark side too. Or maybe they did, but just turned a blind eye for the money. On the SBF side, it makes things look bad if a big celebrity had issues with the company. In other words, there must have been something wrong if they didn't go ahead. And by the way, Taylor Swift's father does have a background in finance and I believe was in a position to advise her at the time. So this Taylor Swift story was one that had been accepted and reported on by the mainstream media until very recently. It transpired, and the source for this is primarily at the moment an article by the New York Times, that the deal had actually been signed by Taylor Swift and was actually withdrawn by Sam Bankman-Fried himself, the opposite to the general narrative. According to them, FTX sat on the deal for some weeks, having received the signed papers from Taylor Swift, and then pulled out, and it was Taylor Swift's team who were actually very unhappy about the whole affair at that time. The report goes on to say that it was actually the price, $100 million, which is extraordinary whichever way you look at it, even with one of the, if not the biggest celebrities in the music world at the moment. And clearly this narrative is favourable to Sam Bankman-Fried, as it shows at least some element of financial probity going on within FTX, especially at a time when there was a lot of turmoil in the crypto world. And I kid you not, despite all of the press, that's really all there is to it. It's a he said, she said, I said, you said world. But this is really quite important, specifically in respect of the celebrities who have been distancing themselves from the crypto world in general. Now, celebrities shilling for this industry, which is getting such a bad name, are starting to pull away. And the cynic in me comes out again as saying, whilst this is true, I think there's not a lot of work for them in the industry at the moment, which is going through somewhat of a bear phase. And so they can say, oh, I'm not doing any endorsements. Now, at some stage there will be a rebound, and when the money starts to flow, we shall see whose hands come out for the fees again. I hope that covers most of the issues in hand. There aren't really many, are there, on this specific one front anyway. Oh, and please consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you do, then it'll make up for the fact that my next door neighbours moved out last week and I'm actually missing their dogs. Who'd have thought it? Bye for now.